Well, Tony, thanks for jumping on here, man, for another episode of H&P Safety Stories. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. Know you're busy and look forward to just having you share a little bit about the topic we're talking about. To kick everybody off who's watching this on YouTube or maybe on LinkedIn, would you just share a little bit about who you are, kind of what your current role is at H&P, where you're located, and maybe how long you've been with the company?
So Daniel, I'm Tony Sauceda. I've been with H&P total of 22 years. Started off as a roughneck on a rig and worked my way into various different positions. I am second generation H&P. My father worked for H&P for, I believe it was 28 years.
Wow.
I'm currently an HSE field rep in the Seguin district, where I managed over 6 rigs and see their day-to-day operations for HSE, which is health, safety, and environmental. So that's kind of my role
Yeah.
in this.
How long have you been HSC field rep?
I believe going on 16 years.
Okay. Nice, man.
Yeah. Held different positions within HSE to where I was an HSE field rep and then transitioned into a HSE specialist for a little bit. And then coming back towards the investigations piece for serious injuries investigations.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about this. This month's theme is the idea or the principle that, if you take care of your equipment, it takes care of you. And being a guy that's been on a rig and around a rig and with guys with floor hands for 22 years now, I'd love if you could share a story or a personal experience where the proper equipment maintenance made a big difference in the outcome of one of the rigs you're on.
If I were to pin one down, there's so many, but I can think of one. It was when I was a floor hand and I just started on H&P 147, which was an old rig. Some of the rigs that I worked with are in the 100s.
That's awesome.
We had pipe tongs that were on the rig floor. That was what we used to break joints of pipe, torque joints of pipe, things like that. And as a floor hand, those things are your tools that you use every day. And it was always instilled in me by my driller to maintain those pieces of equipment, whether it's greasing, whether it's oiling, or changing out dies, adjusting to where it makes your job a lot easier. And I can think of one time, that was what we did before a trip. We got all our tools ready. We got our tongs ready, oiled them up, greased them up, changed out tong dies. And we had one of the fastest trip pulling pipe out of the hole, which they call tripping pipe, one of the fastest tripping pipe out of the hole. And then did the same thing on the way back in. And also where it was the fastest crew out of the 4 on the drilling rig that actually, because we were prepared, we maintained our equipment. Whenever it was time to use them, they were ready to go. And I think that contributed to us getting that speed of our connection, of our tripping out and tripping in the hole, breaking connections and racking back pipes. So I think if I were to pin it down, I would say I remember that one really clearly. I can still see it today. The driller, telling us, hey, make sure your stuff's ready to go because we're fixing to come out of the hole and we're going to be turning and burning. So that was one thing that I remember as a roughneck starting out.
Yeah. Do you keep in touch with any of the guys you broke out with, or are some of those guys still working around H&P?
I'm trying to think of, there was a few that were. One was he was a motorman when I was a floor hand, and he was a drilling superintendent up in Pennsylvania for a while. I don't think he's with us anymore. And then the other floor hand that I remember, he was a rig manager for us in West Texas up until around 2020. And he ended up leaving H&P and went into a different line of work. As for everyone else, Daniel, it was definitely different back then. A lot of the guys were older that were in these higher positions, and a lot of them have since retired or moved on. So
now, do you ever think about what causes that evolution or change in the industry? When you think about why is it that it's not that same way, or even just the expectations not there?
I think, Daniel, if I were to say, it would probably be things were a lot slower back then. Uh,
Okay.
we weren't as big of a company as we are today. So, thinking about how they drill wells today in certain areas, they're drilling, some of these wells in 6 to 7 days, 8 days, where we were drilling the same amount of footage that took us, I don't know, 25 to 30 days.
Yeah.
So a lot faster drilling, a lot faster pace. These guys are seeing a lot more things every well that they're drilling. And I think when I was roughnecking back in those days, it was a slower process. You didn't see as much, so it took a little bit longer to learn.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's interesting. It does seem like both technology and process development helps us achieve a lot of efficiency gains. And, thinking
Mhm.
about that, you even talked about using tongs, and I know there's been advancements in how we handle pipe and make connections and break connections. And, we use ST80s on some, we got the hex grip on some. And, I'm curious, when you think about on the rig, some of the most common equipment maintenance practices, some of them might commonly get overlooked, right? And I'm curious if you could think of any or share any that you think maybe get commonly overlooked. And then what are some of those potential consequences of neglecting those?
Yeah, you mentioned one right now. You said the ST80, and that replaced what I was talking about earlier, the rig tongs, right? And it's the technology that we put on these rigs. Personally, have never operated an ST80, so I don't know. I don't know how to operate them. I know what they do, but I've never operated one. I've seen people operate them on the rigs as I'm out there with the guys. The PDS, meaning the pipe delivery system, which is the automatic catwalk that will raise and lower joints of pipe up to the rig floor. Those pieces of equipment get used every single day. And when I look at the ST80 and I see that they made a long trip, we should be in there greasing. We should be in there changing dyes, cleaning that piece of equipment, checking hoses, because it's going to be used here within the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is. And so that ST80 and even the PDS, there's no other way to pick up a joint of pipe when that PDS is down other than, tie onto it with a hoist, that makes it very inefficient. And that's just the technology. There's so many things that could happen by neglecting that piece of equipment and not servicing it on a frequent interval. I know our PDS, we have a daily where the motorman will go in there, grease certain points, check fluid levels, check pins, make sure that everything is safe.
No, I was going to say, like, when you talk about it, I love learning. I love visiting the rigs. I love learning all about it. I don't come from the field, man. Like, my background's all in marketing. So I get to come to HSE and
Yeah.
focus on a different angle of the business.
Mhm.
But, it's like those things that these guys and gals are using every single day.
Mhm.
I always kind of think about it like the tires on your car, right? Like, we all know the routine maintenance you should have, but we don't. Every time I go get in my car, I don't walk around and look at the tires and pull out my little meter to make sure I've got enough tread depth. And
Yeah.
but if you've ever had a blown out, well, you know how much it sucks. And number one, it exposes me and my family to potential risk. And if you ever change the turn on the side of the highway, there's a lot of risk. I mean,
Mhm.
the last blowout I had, my wife was freaking out because I was on the side of one of the main highways here in Tulsa, 169. And dude, there's just no room. Like, you're just
Mhm.
changing that tire, hoping to God that nobody swerves over, no one's on their phone. I mean, like the same thing, ST8, it's like use it every day, may not even think about it. There's other things that you just don't think about, but there's reasons why we have procedures and policies and routine. You talked about checking the PDS every day. You already got in answered one of my next questions about, how does that regular maintenance contribute to the safety and the performance of drilling? And I think the PDS is a great example. Like,
Mhm.
that's what keeps it going, because I think about it too, is like, being that we put such an emphasis on efficiency, safety supports efficiency, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great example. And so, thinking in that same vein, and over the years, especially in the 16 plus that you've been focused on the HSE side, what are maybe some of the most innovative practices or technologies that you've seen implemented onto the rigs? And then what's the impact? How have those improved overall operations?
So thinking about it, I and I don't know how I feel like this has definitely been something that has improved H&P, and it's here recent. We recently rolled out our e-permits, which is for lockout, tagout, hot work, confined space, things like that. And one example that comes to mind is a rig service. So rig service is where we stop for 30 minutes or maybe a little bit longer, depending on what we have set up with the operator. And it's time for us to maintenance our top drive.
Okay.
Top drive, is probably the most worked piece of equipment out there on the rig. And we count on that thing for a lot. So they're allotted a certain amount of time to service that piece of equipment. When I think about the e-permits and how it affected it, doing the e-permits instead of doing the paper copy where someone had to go up there, start filling out the paperwork, then go downstairs, lock out breakers, come back up, put locks on there, close out paperwork, things like that. With the e-permitting system, they can do it off a tablet while they're there locking it out. So it cuts down 1 to 2 trips going up and down stairs. I believe I timed it one time doing the paper copy to where they had to fill it out on paper and do a full lockout for a rig move. And it took just about more than 18 minutes to do a lockout tagout correctly.
Okay.
With the e-permitting system, it reduced the amount of time the employee had to go up and down the stairs, the efficiency in him being able to hit drop downs instead of writing in information. It decreased the time probably by about maybe 5 to 10 minutes because now it's all electronic and they can go in there and do it. And so before, if they were doing it correctly, the 18 minutes to do a lockout tagout where they only had 30 minutes. So just think of the time that they had from there, from the 18-minute mark to the 30-minute mark, how good of a rig service they could actually do. Now you've just given them an extra 10, maybe 15 minutes to do a better rig service. So thinking of it, innovation using technology to make the job more efficient, but also ensure that we're following our 20-step lockout tagout process efficiently and accurately, right? That form on the electronic form doesn't let you proceed unless you hit all your steps. So where on a paper, you can kind of pencil whip it a little bit. This just ensures that we do the lockout tagout correctly. We're efficient with it, and it gives the guys on the rig more time to do a more thorough rig service on a piece of equipment that gets used every single minute, every single day that it's rigged up. It's working.
Yeah. I love that, man. How long have we been implementing that?
So we trialed it for a year in different districts. We trialed it here in South Texas for about a year, some rigs in West Texas, some rigs up north that trialed it. We rolled it out to everyone in South Texas. We rolled it out in phases. South Texas was the first one, and I believe we rolled it out at the end of January. And then I believe it was every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, we would go to another district. And I believe now they are in our last district, which is West Texas, that they're rolling it out to.
Nice.
So, yeah, I think that was one of the, when you think of innovation, it was just like, man, I've been here for 22 years and I'd have never thought I'd seen something like this. And not only that, Daniel, but I was part of the trial with my rigs. I had 2 of my rigs that had it to be part of the integration of this system. To me is, in the 22 years that I've been here, maybe that's something in 40 years. They're like, man, this electronic system is great. And just to say, I was part of building that, giving the feedback to the developers of the program. Hey, man, this works. This doesn't work. Can we change this? Can we change that? And then working with the guys out there in the field is definitely, I think, something that is exciting to be a part of.
Yeah. That is one of my favorite things. I feel like from my perspective it seems like H&P has a culture that really is responsive to real work feedback, right? Like that our executive team and the leadership team is not ignorant of what's happening out on the rig. So there's a lot of requests for feedback and program development.
Yep.
Just from me looking on the outside in, it's like, man, I love that it seems like people really want the best, like all the way from the top to the bottom. And even, this e-permitting thing, I feel like it helps. Not only does it benefit everyone overall, but it also benefits green new guys, right? New floor hands coming in. I can only imagine everything you have to learn all at once. And I know we've got a very extensive SSE program, and it's super healthy, super strong. But then when you get out there and it's, I hear Mike Lennox say it all the time, work imagine versus work actual, right? Like you get out
Hmm.
there. Now it's like you're doing your first lockout, tag out, and you're like, what do I do? Now you've got it on the tablet and you can go through and do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it, right? Is that was part of this process, right? Like I said earlier, doing it on that electronic form, it doesn't let you proceed
Yeah.
until you've marked off, you've actually read and marked off what it is that it's asking you to do. And it's a training tool also, right? To ensure that we're following our 20-step lockout tagout process. But you're definitely right. Daniel, I can think of my very first day out on the rig, and it was kind of like, man, what did I get myself into? But then I was kind of like, man, this is kind of fun. Man,
Yeah.
this is kind of scary. And so that's kind of what I think of a new employee coming into the workforce of the drilling side, and seeing you see a 130-foot derrick standing up in the air, and you see these
Yeah.
big yellow blocks going up and down, and it's like, man, what is going on here? So it can be overwhelming, but I think we have the tools, we have the technology, we have the training to help give these guys a better footing than what I had when I first started.
When you think about new floor hands, guys and gals coming out for the first
Yeah.
time, how would you drive home the importance of them taking care of their equipment, really thinking about it as owners? And maybe like, what would you encourage them to help develop good maintenance habits from the start?
So with new employees coming in, and how would I instill that, is I would say it comes down to their leadership out there, the driller, the rig manager, the standards they set. I think back to what got me going, right? It was my driller, hey, make sure your stuff's ready to go. I would lean on them to show them how to do it. And it's one of those things that with a new employee, you can kind of mold him how you want, because he doesn't know, right? And so a driller, having strong drillers, that drillers and rig managers, that their level of maintenance care, things like that for the equipment that they're working with, has to start off with those guys. I think that's something that, as someone with all these years of experience, I would lean heavier on the guys that are out there, that are the leaders out there, and not necessarily just the drillers, but also the more seasoned floor hands, the motormen that they work with day in and day out, about
Yeah.
maintaining their equipment. It's, if you think about it, I think you said it earlier, right? It's, if you take care of your equipment, it's going to take care of you. And I think of, this equipment has come a long ways, right? The technology has come a long ways with the ST80 and the PDS and the top drive and things like that. But if there was one thing that I would tell them, is this, right? Technology has come a long way. Equipment has come a long way. And advances in equipment has come a long way, but it still needs you to maintain it, to keep it going. It'll work the whole time until you stop maintaining it. And it
Yeah.
still needs you with the advances of all this equipment.
I like that, man. That's a good nugget right there, Tony.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and that's even, my kind of last question for us talking today is, I always try to think about who might be watching this interview, who might be interested in this topic. And as H&P, man, we obviously strive for developing the safest work environment. We want to put people coming home the same way they go to work. And we develop all of these procedures, these policies, this approach to actively caring. But we don't want it to stop there. I mean, like, our passion for safety extends to where we want the entire industry to pursue safety. We want our competitors, we want our
Mhm.
operators, everyone we work at, to develop this culture and this mindset of proactive pursuit of safety. So to anyone listening who's saying, man, I work either on a different rig, or maybe I'm on H&P rig, or, I'm just in the industry and I want to help cultivate this idea of proactive equipment maintenance within the people I work with. How would you encourage them to help either start that, or to help inspire their leadership to play a role in that?
So I think one way that I would, try to start doing that is by actually engaging people in conversation as to what are they seeing out there, what are the most failures, and what are some things that we can learn from them so we can pass those along not only to the other crews, but also, like you said, to people in other industries, things like that, is to know the people that are working on that piece of equipment, get to know the equipment that you're working with. Always try to learn as much as you can. Ask the questions. What does this do? Why is this important? And once they understand the why behind it, why it's important to maintain these pieces of equipment, or why it's important to oil our stuff, grease it, change dyes, inspect it, that right there, I think, drives that thought in that person's head. I think of like my kids, and I always tell them, hey, just clean your room, clean your room, clean your room. And I find myself having to tell them more and more, every week, every month, whatever it is, every 2 weeks. And it isn't until I give them the why behind the what, like, hey, you're going to have friends coming over and they're going to see your bedroom, nasty, dirty, whatever. And what is that going to look like on you? What does it look like on me?
Yeah. Are they
And
going to want to come back? You know?
yeah, are they ever going to want to come back? But that's kind of what I think of, right? Is get them to understand what it is that it actually does, how important, how vital role it plays in their day-to-day work, to where if we're maintaining our equipment, it's gonna take care of us, not only in the safety aspect, but also in being productive, right? So if we don't maintain it and it goes down, guess what? Now we're putting guys on the road that don't need to be on the road so they can go fix it, and we're also putting other people in danger, because now we're having to change a part in already a cramped area. So that's one thing that I would say is learn what it does, why it's important, learn the why behind the what. Don't just, hey, we do this. Why do we do this?
Yeah. I like that. I mean, the two big things I hear and I kind of learn from this, and I want to highlight for everybody, is the learn the why behind the what, because that really does. I mean, my kids are the same, man. Like, and honestly, you're maybe kinder than I am. I'm like, the why is because I told you so, and I'm tired of looking at your dirty room. But then also, I think you were talking about a few minutes ago just about the the maintenance equation requires you, right? Like, these pieces of equipment will work and they can continue to work if you're doing your part. So that's the
Mhm.
thing, is like learning the part you have to do and then doing it, just
Mhm.
doing it, like doing this maintenance, letting this be a routine part of your day and your schedule. So
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Like you said, it's all, we could have the most technologically advanced equipment out there, but it still requires us, right? It still requires people to be out there servicing it. You think of like one of the vehicles, Teslas, you know, self-driving, they do this, they do that, but they still need to be maintained, air in the tires. You have to inspect to make sure that everything's working on them. So, that's all the technology, but
yeah,
it still needs us.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, seriously, Tony, again, I just appreciate just hanging out with you, learning
Yeah.
from you, um, kind of sharing your insights and your passion, honestly, man, for just keeping guys safe on the rigs and keeping work going. So thank you so much for your time, dude. And we're gonna make you YouTube famous, you know?
Hey, I'm here for it.